and welcome to Sunday Bible Chat for the 27th Sunday in Ordinary Time, which happens to be October the 7th. Today I want to begin my reflection by focusing on Genesis 2, in which God says, "It is not good for the man to be alone," and God not only creates man but also creates woman. The idea being that we need companions in the garden. Not only in the garden, which of course is Eden, but we need companions in the Valley of Tears, which is outside Eden. Many of us would not survive the hardships of life if it were not for significant others in our lives, whether spouses or close friends or religious communities. And so it is very good then that we have companions, not only to break bread with, but also to support us in our journey through this life. In fact, reflecting on how important those people are, all we have to do is think about how solitary confinement is in some ways the ultimate punishment. And when people are imprisoned, whether as prisoners of war or as prisoners in our penal system, when they're put into solitary, that is really one of the worst forms of punishment that somebody can endure, to be on their own day in, day out, without any human interaction. Pretty tough. Or there's also the possibility of somebody being shunned by their community. And though it's not common for this to happen, yet I do know somebody that endured this. After he got divorced, his religious community, which was very close to the Amish in terms of how it functioned, his religious community completely shunned him. So he lost all contact with his parents, his siblings, his cousins, his uncles, his aunts, his neighbors, his school friends, his elders, and then the land that he grew up on. And then, of course, he was not going to be able to visit or even inherit the land which would have been his had things gone their normal course. And so it was not surprising that he ended up in a state of depression, even though that wasn't his normal disposition. But the depression, of course, from the solitude and the shunning and the exile was to be expected. And then one more form of separation is what's happening at our borders. And I'm not going to spend much time on this. This will be conversation for another chat. But what we're doing to couples in separating them, husbands separated from wife, parents separated from children, the families being split up at our borders in the name of immigration policies, that is in some ways a divorce that we're enforcing on people. And I believe it's contrary to Jesus' will for unity. But enough of that for now. Again, I can come back to that some other time. What I'd like to focus on now is the sacred marriage. Again, we're born into this world on our own and we exit on our own. And in between, we need companionship and fellowship. But we're also meant to be pursuing or to be living the sacred marriage. Well, what do I mean by that? In the first place, as individuals, we need to develop in such a way, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, that while we welcome the presence of others in our lives, we don't need them, but rather we appreciate them, we're enriched by them, but we don't cling to them because we cannot function on our own. When we are fully individuated, integrated human beings, we don't need others, but we enjoy their company. We benefit from their support, and they do enrich our lives. So whether it's a spouse, a significant friendship, a religious community, or a group of friends, we need people in our lives to be there to enrich us, but not because we have some kind of emptiness that they're going to fill. The emptiness that each of us has can only be filled by God. And so the ultimate sacred marriage is not even the marriage with self or the marriage with another, but it is the marriage we consummate with God. Now, this sounds all very grand and mysterious and mystical, but I do believe this is the ultimate purpose of life, that we are meant to go through this world with the benefit of others' company, learning who we are, learning our identity. But our true mission in this world is to achieve that oneness with God, which can only come when we achieve a oneness with self, and then with others, and then with the cosmos on which we live. So you might say, well, how do we achieve this oneness with God? What does it mean to be involved in a sacred marriage with God? Just as in an earthly marriage, it means two people living as a we instead of out of the ego. So in the sacred marriage with God, we must leave behind our ego selves and in fact surrender to the divine self, so that it really is Christ who lives in me and I in him, and it's not just about me, or my, or mine, but rather my whole self, my whole destiny, my whole future is going to be in compliance with the divine will, and that becomes the primary relationship from which all other relationships benefit. So when we have achieved that sacred marriage in ourselves, that relationship with self and with God, when they're in the right proportion to one another, then we're able to maintain and create significant relationships with others that are not built on neediness, but rather built on love. Because as long as we need somebody in our lives, we're using them. We're basically treating them as objects, whether they make our lives more comfortable, whether they make us look good, whether they have assets of some kind which benefit us. Still, we're relating to those important people, whether they are spouses, friends, or religious community. We're relating to them as objects, as people who satisfy our craving for, whether it's power, whether it's popularity, whether it's being part of the in crowd, whether it's wealth, whatever it is that person brings to us, we're then utilizing that person. So rather to be free in our relationships with others, so that we can relate to them not out of need but out of love, we have to be in love with ourselves and in love with God. Love of self and love of God allow us to love neighbor. And of course, this isn't an original statement. Love of neighbor is secondary to love of self. It can only happen when we love ourselves. And love of God is primary. And it's out of that love of God that we have a right relationship with ourselves. And you might say, well, what does it mean to love ourselves? Isn't that egotistical? I was speaking to somebody today about the love of God, and we were just having a conversation, and my comment was that when we put ourselves down, when we have poor self-esteem, when we are constantly berating ourselves and seeing ourselves as inadequate, then somehow we are diminishing that presence of God within ourselves, which is almost as bad as grandiosity. On the one hand, we build ourselves up and make gods of ourselves, and on the other hand, we might put ourselves down and deny the image of likeness of God that is in us already. So there's a balance in there somewhere, and that is my reflection for today, that the balance reflects sacred marriage, the marriage of God and self, the marriage of self, and then the marriage that then can come with others, especially one's significant other, if one is blessed enough to have one. So on that happy note, I will leave you for today and look forward to our gathering next Sunday.